I was born and raised in Uganda, and unfortunately went through the horrific war with Idi Amin. That trauma caused my mother actually to regress from the sweet, wonderful woman she was, strong Christian woman, into a depression that brought on abusive tendencies in her. I was born and raised in Uganda, and unfortunately went through the horrific war with Idi Amin and saw things that 12-year-olds should not be seeing in their life. When the war broke out in Uganda, when Idi Amin took over in a bloody coup, we didn't know what was going on, really. We didn't really understand what the coup was until we started hearing about the military and people dying, being killed just for being the wrong tribe, for example. And people disappearing. You just hear that somebody had been pulled from their home the night before and they couldn't be found. I remember one incident where we were careful about eating fish because the lake had been filled with bodies that had just been dumped. And the fish were, of course, eating that, which was kind of gross to even imagine. But it was horrific. When I was a little short of my 13th birthday, right before we fled the country, my mom was taking us to school, and I was sitting in the front with her. It's just to show you how terrible that war was. And as we were driving out to go to the main road to go to school down to Kampala, we saw these 5 men that had been brutally beaten, and they were just bloody, covered in blood, clothes all ripped off and everything. And just as we turned a corner to go, the military guys that had beaten them up threw kerosene on them and just lit them on fire. And that was one of the worst things that I've ever seen in my life, to hear the screams and see those men just burning, and nobody came to help them. That was what that war was like. It was horrific. I mean, you don't hear as much of it because the States is so far away, and there were many times where I was asking my mom, why did nobody help those men? Because when you're 13, it's like somebody's hurt. Surely somebody can come and help, and nobody could go and help them. You were afraid for your life. Especially because Idi Amin at that time in 1972, ordered the Indians to leave Uganda. And you couldn't take anything with you. There were body searches happening at the airport, and just trying to flee the country to get space on the plane to get out was terrible. You'd be at the airport. When we went to the Seychelles, we had no help. We fled literally with just a few belongings that we were able to carry with us. We actually were turned away twice at the airport, and were just lucky that the third time, the gentleman that helped us, I truly believe he must have been a Christian man, but he helped to get the 7 of us on a flight, and it was one of the last flights that left Uganda. We ended up on the islands in a rundown shack, which was the old family home that was falling apart at the seams. We had no running water in the house. The bathroom was an old outhouse that was about 50 yards away from the house. And that trauma caused my mother actually to regress from the sweet, wonderful woman she was, strong Christian woman, into a depression that brought on abusive tendencies in her. Having lost everything, she'd gone from having a beautiful home in Uganda and her own car and her own career, which was very successful, to having nothing, being in a rundown shack, with termites chomping at the wood every day, every minute practically. She turned to drinking. We don't know why. Once she started drinking, the abuse would start, the beatings would start, and a lot of emotional and verbal abuse that went on for about 13 years. But I believe it was a way to release the pain that she was feeling, that she was going through. She had been abused as a child herself. And while she had let go of that when she was younger, the trauma of what we saw during the war, when we fled Uganda and went to the Seychelles, brought it all back, and she became abusive towards us as children. My dad was there. Very difficult situation for him. My dad loves and just cherishes my mom. It was a situation that he didn't know how to deal with. And as an adult now, looking back, I can see the difficulties that he had trying to deal with this. Here was this woman that he loved, that he didn't know had these tendencies. He had to start life fresh for everybody, try to keep the family going, and he had to figure out how to put food on the table every day. So in many ways, he didn't know how to handle the situation. We didn't have the kind of quality health care that you have here in the States, where somebody who's suffering from depression can get the help and assistance they need. We didn't have that on the islands. The only place that he could take her would have been the mental institution. And while it was a mental disease that she had, she wasn't at the place where she needed to be in an institution. So what he did was he tried to overlook it and just tried by taking care of her and helping her to get a home. He tried to rebuild our home. He opened up a grocery store so she had a place to work. He thought that that would be enough, but it wasn't. I have 4 other siblings, and my oldest sister actually got married pretty soon after we arrived on the island, so she didn't have to go through a lot of what the rest of us did. My 2 brothers went and opened up a badminton club, so they had an outlet to get away from mom when things got really bad. And my second sister and myself ended up being the ones with mom. The difficult situations for us was having to deal with the anger that would overcome her at just any time. And you never knew when it would strike. What actually helped her to change was a very difficult situation where my brother had fallen in love with this woman that mom did not feel was right. And she tried talking with him and tried to get that separation there. And he'd made the decision that he really did care for this girl. So he'd come home one day, and the rest of us were sitting watching television after lunch, and I said to my older brother, because I had this innate sense of watching out for her. If the house was quiet, I knew something was up. Go find her. And I said to my older brother, "Where's mom?" And he says to me, "Oh, I think she's just in her bedroom." So I went down and quietly started looking for her, because she was also suicidal. With the depression and the anger issues she battled, suicidal tendencies as well. And she wasn't in her bedroom, she wasn't in the kitchen, so I thought, okay, something is not right here. Well, I went into my brother's bedroom just to look, and he was on the floor on his knees, and she had him in a chokehold. And I was able, by the grace of God, to get in between them and separate them. She had him in such a strong hold that he couldn't even scream, he couldn't even call out for help. I was, oh my gosh, late teens. My brother was older, and he's a strong man, and you could have thought that, you know, he would have been able to break loose. But one of the things we knew with mom is when she got really angry and went into one of those rages, it literally took 3 or 4 of us to hold her back. She just, I don't know where that strength came from. But I was able, like I said, by the grace of God, to get in between her and him and break the hold and grab him out of there. Called out for my older brother, who grabbed him, and I said to him, "Get him out of the house." Because mom was just, it was the worst rage I'd ever seen her in. But with that, her anger turned towards me because I had gotten him out of there. And she started, of course, beating on me, and I was able to hold my hands against the doors and the door jamb and just stop her from following. And I screamed for my other sister to get out of the house, because I knew this was a very dangerous situation. So we started running for the door, and as I got to the doors, I don't know what it was that made me turn to look where she was. And I turned around, and she was holding a coffee table, a wooden coffee table, and she just threw it right at me. Well, that struck me on the temple, and the last thing I heard was my father saying, "You've killed her." And I was out. I was gone. Well, I lost consciousness for a little bit, and when I came back, a lot of pain, a lot of headaches, and suffered with migraines after that for a number of years. But slowly after that, she started to change. I think that moment made her realize, I almost killed my child. And she started changing a little bit. She started accepting help. She started actually going to the doctors to look for help, and slowly began to come back a little bit, cut off from the alcohol. But she still suffered. And I really believe it was because she had not forgiven the things that had been done to her as a child growing up. And she later, as she started getting better at talking and telling us about it, she would cry and tell us about how she had been abused as a child. And later in life, what we found out was those abusive tendencies came to the forefront because of the traumatic experiences that she had gone through in Uganda, when we had seen people being killed in front of us. And it just triggered something in her that she couldn't handle, the pain and the anguish that was in her. But she started to change, and that was a great thing, because as we each started getting married and having our own families, part of the condition we had was we were going to break that cycle of abuse with our generation. It stopped with us. And the 5 siblings, we've been so strong about doing that, really acknowledging that it stops with us, and our children will know nothing but love and the right way of discipline.